Ah, the Mojo Rising. What a whiskey-soaked dressing room in 1991 taught me about finding your real high. It was 1991, and Val Kilmer's Doors movie had just hit the theaters about a week before. Oh, the whole country was briefly tilted back towards that wonderful time in the late 60s, towards Morrison, the King Snake, the Lizard King. It was one of those cultural moments where nostalgia arrives like a weather system, and you just have to ride it. The streets had a different feel. The radio actually had a different feel. And for a few weeks, every rock club in America had different sort of construction of feeling this sort of vibe. Now, we were playing in Boston that night at the Channel Club. Oh boy, a legendary room in the waterfront that could hold about 1,500 people. Oh, the experiences I could tell you. So it felt like the inside of a heartbeat when it was really packed. We were sharing the bill with a Doors tribute act called Riders on the Storm. They were good. They were really good. They were convincing. The kind of tribute band that does not just play the songs, but actually commits to the whole thing. The mythology in this case for Mr. Morrison. Now, the dressing room backstage was tight. Too many people, too much energy. And somehow, not only beer, but whiskey showed up. And not just a bottle, but like a supply of whiskey was there. Now, we were in with a second band. There's two bands to warm up for this this Doors cover tribute band. And we were, let's just say, doing our normal pre-game structure where we would have a few drinks before we got on stage. But it got a little bit crazy. And the other band that was with us was swigging down whiskey like it was water. And eventually we kind of joined in that little fray. And this is what you do about, I guess, when you're young 20-something years old in a dressing room in Boston. When the crowd, let's just say outside, was already wound up and the walls are practically vibrating. And I mean vibrating from the situation that was going on outside. From 35 years ago, this is generally murky in my mind, but I do remember a bit of roughhousing escalating. It does when nobody's kind of watching. One moment, it's joking around, and then the next moment there are, let's just say, coat racks down and chairs tipped over and holes in the walls and glass doing what glass does when it hits the ground. That dressing room looked like what you'd expect, a scene from the movie itself. Now, I want to be nice about this because it's not something we normally would have done, but it was sort of, as I said, there was a feeling that we were all in this. Now, the next morning, I shared a bill from the club owner that wasn't very pleasant. That part was crystal clear. But somehow both bands, my band and the other band, got on stage and we played a couple of sets before the headliner came on. And the place obviously was filled past 1,000 people. The audience had no idea who we were, and they just basically were happy that we were jamming along and having a good old time. And they were there for the experience and for the energy. And for whatever that room was on, they danced, and they danced very strangely. They were spirited. The only way a crowd in a dark room with good music and cheap drinks and, let's just say, other substances could do. And then the Jim Morrison lookalike walked out. Oh, good gravy. I want to tell you, you have to understand this. This is like everybody's in Morrison mood. Millions of people are screaming this movie, best thing since sliced bread, and everybody knows it. Everybody's seen it. And I'll tell you, this Jim Morrison actor, he was committed. The hair, the leather, the stare, the inebriated stance. But in that way, that sometimes produces a strange kind of focus rather than a collapse or verge of a collapse. He moved around the stage like he'd been born there. Inside, the mythology was just this returning to it one more time, like just jumping in. And then during LA Woman, their song that's the most famous, he just stopped in the middle of the song. The band kept rolling. Now, he came out with that poetry. It looked like a genuine trance, as he said it at first, and building and building. Mojo rising, keep your mojo rising. The room went from swaying, drifting into this trance to something else eternally, from passive to electric, from watching to participating. One sentence, one shift, the whole architecture of this evening changed in about 4 bars of music. I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about that moment a lot lately because there is a switch. It exists for everyone, and it can move you from a slow, numbing hum to full presence and exuberance in an instant. The question worth sitting with is, what are you pointing that switch towards when you flip it? That night pointed towards what I would call the lowest common denominator. We can be nice about that. Now, that experience was not a criticism. It's just honest. It's just what it was. It was the whiskey. It was the chaos. It was the destruction of a dressing room. It was the borrowed recklessness of a lifestyle that belonged to a character of a different era, and honestly, to people far more tortured than any of us. It was entertaining. It was funny. It makes good story 35 years later. But the switch itself is the thing that keep coming back to. Because that, my friend, is the same switch aimed at different frequency is the most powerful engine I know. The cerebral version of mobile rising or mojo rising, the version where the electricity is in the room that comes from the ideas instead of from substances that are being ingested, from the connection instead of the spectacle, from the people who are generally trying to figure out something new and unique together instead of watching someone else pretend to be someone they never were. That is where I find myself today. That's what I'm learning now. Not away from energy, not towards anything quiet or small, but towards the nourishing kind of frenzy, the conversations that run long because no one wants to stop. The rooms where people are building something with their minds and their curiosity. The shared intensity of experience of an intellectual appetite pointed into a constructive direction. That's what I'm talking about. I have done some coaching over the years, and there is satisfaction for sure in that. But what truly lights me up is the trade, the back and forth, the moment when someone says something that actually rewrites the frame of mind you had for years. And you feel the room shift. You feel your mind shift the way that the Channel Club shifted that night. This is the mojo I'm chasing now. The proactive listening, the proactive response, the engagement itself as the reward. Now, Jim Morrison never made it to the other side on that switch. He gave us the electricity, but burned out in the current. The lesson I took from the parking lot version of him that night in Boston was simpler than anything he'd ever wrote, and maybe more useful. The switch is real. The surge is real. The only variable is what you aim it at. Here's the lessons it's learned. The capacity for exuberance is not the problem. It's one of the most valuable things you carry as a human. The architecture of going from flat to fully alive in a single moment is wired into every one of us. There's no question. The only thing worth examining is where you have been pointing it towards and whether that direction is building. Or is it just burning through? Real mojo is not the absence of intensity. It is the intensity aimed at construction, at connection, at the kind of cerebral fire that leaves something standing when the night is over. What in your world, tell me, is your mojo? And when is the last time you actually aimed it at something? Worth the charge? Maybe. But only if you make it so.